Hello friends, I'm George, the nice smelling gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. It's time for another video where I will revisit 10 fragrances that I've previously reviewed on my channel. Some of them have received quite a lot of hype in the past, others are not so well known in the community, but I've the one thing that all 10 fragrances that I'm going to talk about in today's video is one thing that they have in common is the fact that I've had them for quite a while. So let me share with you my updated thoughts on those 10 fragrances. The first fragrance that I'm going to talk about in today's video, that I'm going to revisit in today's video, comes from Paris Corner and their Emir line of fragrances, and it's called Celestial. And this probably to this day is the most famous clone of Ganymede, and in my humble opinion to this day still the best clone of Ganymede when it comes to how close scent-wise it is to the original scent. It feels very similar to that unique original fragrance. Feels a little bit less spicy and less mineralic in the opening. The dry down feels a little bit fresher in my opinion, but other than that this is actually very close to Ganymede. Now I've said this many times in the past, but Ganymede has never been one of my most favorite scents, and Celestial, you know, like the original scent, again, I'm not a huge fan of this thing. To me this just smells too medicinal, you know. But again, I cannot deny the fact that this actually scent-wise is very similar to the original fragrance. I've tried a few other Ganymede clones, and my updated opinion on Celestial is that it's still to this day the closest thing that you can get to Ganymede, at least from when it comes to Middle Eastern fragrance clones. So again, if you're looking for the best or the closest scent-wise clone of Ganymede, you definitely need to check out Celestial from Paris Corner. The second fragrance that I'm going to revisit in this video comes from the brand of Rassi, and it was actually one of my very first Middle Eastern pickups, you know, over 2 years ago, and it's called Rassi Daresh pour Homme. This is the male version because there's also a female version. Now this fragrance is not a straight up clone of anything, but it feels very similar to something like Valentino V. You know, it's quite a famous fragrance that has been discontinued for a very long time, and this fragrance, you know, the scent can be very divisive, and I can see why that's the case. A lot of people find this fragrance to be very spicy, especially in the opening, and I do agree that the cumin note in here is quite strong. There's a cardamom note as well that adds even more spiciness. There's a bit of a green feel to it as well. The dry down is very sweet. There's a lot of amber and vanillic sweetness. There's a hint of tonka bean powderness, you know, a bit of musk. All around it's a very interesting scent profile that's definitely not for everybody, but this was a sort of a love at first sniff for me. I blind bought this over 2 years ago, and to this day I really like this scent. It's a very nice fragrance that in my opinion just works great in something like the fall season, especially at night. Again though, a very divisive scent. Definitely it's still around and still carries you know, some attention, gets some attention. My opinion to this fragrance has not changed. I still really like it since the first day that I got it, but definitely at this point I would say that this is not a safe fragrance for blind buying. Definitely try to sample or try this one first before getting it. The next two scents that I'm going to revisit will be from the brand of Armaf, and the first one is called Signature Night. And this to this day, in my opinion, continues to be one of those hidden gems from Armaf. Not a very well known fragrance in the community. Again, like the previous one, not a straight up clone of anything, but it feels very similar to something like Bulgari's Men in Black. I love the original fragrance, and this thing actually gets pretty close, although again not a straight up clone of the original scent. This feels a little bit fresher, feels a little bit less sweet, and sort of on warm and dark on the dry down, like a slightly fresher, maybe a little bit more wearable version of the original fragrance, like an EDT flanker to the Men in Black scent profile. I really like the original again, and I really like a Signature Night from Armaf, and my opinion has not changed about this fragrance. It still to this day remains a very big like, you know, a huge like for me, and one of those hidden gems. And the second Armaf fragrance that I'm going to revisit is called Odysse Mega from the Armaf Odysse line of fragrances, limited edition as well. This is one of those fragrances that I come back to check every now and then, because I really think that Armaf did a good job with the scent of this fragrance. This is a clone of a YEDP from YSL, and scent wise this is really nice. But one area where this seriously lacks is the performance. So again, from time to time, you know, a few months time, I come back to check this fragrance out just to see how it performs, and unfortunately nothing seems to be changing when it comes to the performance. This thing is really underperforming. I get about 5 hours tops out of this fragrance, which is a huge shame again, because I think scent wise this is really nice and really close to YEDP. The next one will be one of those very impressive, in fact one of the most impressive cheapies in my Middle Eastern collection, and at the same time one of the cheapest fragrances in my Middle Eastern fragrance collection that I have. It comes from the brand of Sapil, and it's called Bound for Men. And this one is cloning none other than Armani's called Profumo. And actually, again, it's a very impressive clone of Profumo. Very similar to the original fragrance. You get that very sexy scent profile that relies on a lot of amber and tonka bean sweetness, also a lot of fruity sweetness. You get some aromatic notes in here, like a lavender note. There's a very nice and sexy amount of suede leather note in here. Very close to the original fragrance, surprisingly close, and also surprisingly good when it comes to performance. Really long lasting fragrance. And again, the best thing out of all is the fact that this is super affordable. At least around here, if you can find this, you know, Nutino usually sell it for something like 15 euros or thereabout, which is an absolute steal in my opinion. And my mind has not changed on this fragrance. For me, this is an absolute 10 out of 10 cheapie. Really good fragrance, especially at the price point, and I think this punches way above its actual price. The next one comes from the brand of Maison Alhambra, and it's called Afro Leather, and this one is very heavily inspired by African leather from Memo, and this is one of the very good, one of the better Maison Alhambra fragrances in my opinion. Very similar to the original scent. Now, I've had one huge problem with this fragrance. I've talked about that in the actual review of this one, and that's the opening, and to be more exact, that's the amount of the coming note that this fragrance has, which makes it you know, a little bit different compared to the original scent. The original also has a coming note, but at least my bottle of Afro Leather is very strong with the coming note. When I first got this, it was quite harsh as well, but you know, over like 7 or 8 months of maceration has helped with this. The scent has now nicely settled, and when I get past those first few minutes where the coming note is really strong, this turns into a really nice, warm and cozy scent. Perfectly unisex, with a nice amount of leather on the dry down, nice amount of ambery sweetness, some spiciness. It's a really good fragrance on its own, and a really good clone of African leather. Again, if you can get past that first 5 minutes, or if you're not bothered by a strong coming note, then definitely check out Afro Leather from Maison Alhambra. The next two fragrances will come from the brand of Lattafa, and the first one is called Rams Silver, and this one is cloning Ultra Mauve from Jean Paul Gaultier. I've always said this, but this is like a slightly simplified version of Ultra Mauve. It lacks a bit of that sparkly opening that the original fragrance has. This feels a little bit more flat, let's call it that. Still get a lot of pure sweetness, a lot of vanillic sweetness, but to my nose this has more emphasis on the actual vanillic sweetness. It lacks a bit of that freshness and sparkle that you get out of the original scent. That just adds a bit to the magic when it comes to Ultra Mauve. This is slightly flatter, slightly more linear, but at the same time it's actually very easy to wear, and actually, especially on the dry down, gets very close to the original scent, has very strong performance, and carries a very low price tag. Still to this day one of the most affordable Ultra Mauve clones, and one of the most affordable Lattafa fragrances. And the second Lattafa that I'm going to revisit in today's video is called Sheykh Shyuykh Final Edition, and this one, again, like the Armaf Odysse Mega, is very heavily inspired by YSL YEDP, but this I think is way better. The scent in here doesn't feel like a straight up clone. This feels more like a take on the original DNA. It feels a little bit more woody, feels a little bit more spicy, feels a little bit darker. It's like a darker flanker to the original scent, but the quality is still very nice, just not super close to the original fragrance. But where this is better than Odysse Mega is the performance. Now, it's not a huge performer, it's not a beast mode performing scent, but definitely outperforms Odysse Mega without any problems. I've been getting easily about 7 hours of performance out of this fragrance, which is at least 2 hours over the Armaf, you know, offering. It feels like a slightly darker, slightly more mature version of YEDP, and I really like it. And to this day, this to me remains my most favorite clone of YEDP. The next fragrance that I'm going to revisit in today's video comes from the brand of Rue Broca, and it's called Luminous. And this one is heavily inspired by Dior Sauvage Elixir. This feels like a fruitier take on the Dior Sauvage Elixir DNA. It's not a bad clone of Sauvage Elixir. In fact, it's quite good, has very decent performance, as you can see, has a pressurized atomizer. All around a very interesting offering that unfortunately I think it does not get that much attention. I still think this is a nice fragrance, especially if you can get it for a good price. Sometimes Nutino sell this for something like 15 euros. At that price point, I think this is a very nice option if you're looking for an you know, a clone of Dior Sauvage Elixir, because at that price point it's about half the price of Lattafa's Assad. So if you're looking for the cheapest possible way to get close to to Dior Sauvage Elixir, then you can check out Luminous from Rue Broca. Although again, I just think at this point in time it feels a little bit redundant with all the other you know, Elixir clones. And the last fragrance that I'm going to revisit in today's video is another one of those hidden gems, one of those fragrances that don't really get that much attention. It comes from the brand of Saint Hilaire, and it's called Ambre Chic. And this one is cloning Valentino Uomo Intense. Now, I absolutely love the original fragrance, and to be honest, Ambre Chic actually does a very good job you know, at copying the original fragrance. It's not a one-to-one clone. Feels a little bit different. This feels a little bit fresher in the opening, feels a little bit more powdery, and then on the dry down lacks the strength of the leather note that the original one has. Although it still has a leather note, it just feels less prominent and with less quality. But at the same time, this actually, especially in the air, smells very similar to Valentino Uomo Intense. Also carries, at least my bottle carries, very good performance, almost on par with the original scent. And the best thing is that it's very cheap. When I picked this one up over a year ago, I paid something like 15 euros, which I think at that price point is an absolute steal. And there are not that many Valentino Uomo Intense clones out there as well. So if you're looking for a Valentino Uomo Intense clone, then definitely check out Ambre Chic from Saint Hilaire. I still think to this day, you know, my opinion has not changed, that this is a hidden gem. And so guys, in today's video I revisited 10 cheap fragrances that I have previously reviewed on my channel. I hope that you found this video interesting or entertaining. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.